As Aurora's pregnant body crashed onto the dirt track under the harsh stadium lights, Ellie watched in horror as thousands of spectators fell silent, unaware that history was unfolding before their eyes. The impossibly white foal that emerged minutes later, standing on his own and fixing the crowd with ancient knowing eyes, would shatter everything humanity thought they understood about the bond between species. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The thundering of hooves against packed dirt had always been music to Ellie's ears. Ever since she was a little girl, she had dreamed of working with racehorses, and now at 28, she was living that dream as the head groom at Willow Creek Racing Stables. But nothing in her years of experience had prepared her for what would happen on that fateful night in June, when the world seemed to hold its breath under the harsh glare of stadium lights. Aurora was special from the day she arrived at the stables. A chestnut thoroughbred with a white blaze running down her face like a streak of lightning, she had the kind of spirit that made great champions. Fierce, determined, but with a gentleness that showed in her eyes when Ellie would brush her coat in the quiet mornings before the rest of the world woke up. "You're going to be a legend," Ellie would whisper to Aurora, running her hands along the mare's powerful shoulders. "I can feel it in my bones." Aurora had been purchased by Maxwell Stone, one of the wealthiest owners in the racing circuit, after she'd shown promising results at smaller tracks. Maxwell was known for his cutthroat approach to the sport. Horses were investments, nothing more. But even he couldn't deny there was something exceptional about Aurora. "That mare's got heart," he'd admitted grudgingly after watching her train one morning, the rising sun casting long shadows across the track. "Let's just hope she's got speed to match." She did. Aurora won her first 3 races for Willow Creek, each victory more impressive than the last. She ran with a kind of joy that was rare to see, as if each stride was an expression of freedom rather than competition. The racing world began to take notice, and Aurora's name started appearing in conversations about championship contenders. Then came the unexpected news. During a routine examination, the vet discovered Aurora was pregnant. Somehow, before her purchase, she had been bred and no one had caught it. Maxwell was furious, seeing only lost opportunity and wasted money. "Get rid of it," he ordered, his voice cold. "I didn't buy a broodmare, I bought a racehorse." Ellie had stood in the corner of the stable office, her hands clenched into fists so tight her nails cut into her palms. "Sir," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "Aurora is nearly 5 months along. Terminating now would be dangerous for her." "Then we race her until we can't," Maxwell replied, already turning to leave. "The second she slows down, she's done. I'll sell her for breeding stock and cut my losses." That night, Ellie had stayed late, sitting on a bale of hay outside Aurora's stall. The mare had come to nuzzle her shoulder, as if sensing her distress. "I won't let anything happen to you," Ellie promised, though she had no idea how she would keep that promise. She was just a groom with no authority and little money. Maxwell Stone owned Aurora, and in the racing world, his word was law. Against all odds, Aurora continued to race brilliantly, her pregnancy hidden beneath her flowing stride. The vet, an old friend of Ellie's, agreed to keep their secret, monitoring the mare carefully to ensure she remained healthy. As the weeks passed, Ellie lived in constant fear that someone would notice, that Aurora would be pushed too hard, that something would go wrong. 4 months later, with Aurora now heavily pregnant but still miraculously concealing her condition beneath her athletic frame, Maxwell entered her in the Willow Creek Invitational, a prestigious night race that would attract the biggest names in the industry. The purse was substantial, and a win would cement Aurora's reputation as one of the finest mares in racing. "She's been training slower this week," Ellie told him desperately. "Maybe we should consider another race later in the season." Maxwell fixed her with a cold stare. Are you telling me how to manage my investment, Miss Carter? Ellie swallowed hard. No, sir. I'm just concerned about... Your job is to make sure my horses are ready to race. Nothing more. His tone left no room for argument. Aurora races on Saturday. End of discussion. The night of the race arrived, warm and clear with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of summer flowers across the track. The stands were packed, the atmosphere electric with anticipation. Aurora was a favorite, her odds reflecting the public's confidence in her impressive record. In the paddock, Ellie adjusted Aurora's saddle one last time, her hands trembling slightly. The mare's sides were expanded, but in the shadows of the evening and amid the pre-race chaos, no one seemed to notice. Easy, girl, Ellie murmured, pressing her forehead against Aurora's neck. Just make it through this, please. Aurora nudged her gently, those intelligent eyes seeming to say she understood. Ellie had to blink back tears as the jockey, a slight man named Carlos, who had ridden Aurora to all her victories, mounted up. She feels good, Carlos said with a confident smile. We've got this. As Ellie watched Aurora being led to the starting gate, a sense of dread settled over her like a physical weight. She hurried to the rail, her heart pounding in her chest. The starting bell rang, the gates flew open, and the race began. Aurora broke well, settling into fourth position as the field of 12 thundered down the track. The crowd roared, the sound washing over Ellie like a wave as she clutched the rail, her knuckles white. For the first half of the race, everything seemed fine. Aurora maintained her position, running smoothly despite her hidden burden. Then, as they rounded the final turn, she began to move up, challenging the leaders with that magnificent stride that had made her a rising star. The crowd's cheers grew louder as Aurora pulled alongside the frontrunner, then began to edge ahead. For a moment, it seemed like she would claim another victory against impossible odds. Then it happened. Just 100 yards from the finish line, under the brightest of the stadium lights, Aurora faltered. Her stride broke, her powerful body suddenly uncoordinated. Carlos, sensing disaster, tried to pull her up, but it was too late. Aurora stumbled, her front legs buckling beneath her. She crashed to the track in a cloud of dust, her body rolling as Carlos was thrown clear. The crowd gasped collectively, the sound like the rush of a sudden storm. Ellie was moving before she even realized it, vaulting over the rail and sprinting across the track, oblivious to the danger of the horses still thundering past. All she could see was Aurora, lying motionless on the ground, the dark stain of the dirt against her bright chestnut coat. No, 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 Ellie chanted as she ran, the word a desperate prayer. Track officials were already rushing toward the fallen mare, and someone was trying to intercept Ellie, to keep her from the scene, but she dodged their grasp. When she reached Aurora, the mare's sides were heaving, her eyes wide with pain and fear. Ellie fell to her knees beside her, hands hovering uncertainly, afraid to touch and cause more harm. Help is coming, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Hold on, Aurora. Please hold on. The track veterinarian arrived moments later, his face grim as he began his examination. Ellie moved back just enough to give him room, her hand still resting on Aurora's neck, feeling the rapid pulse beneath her fingers. That's when she noticed something that made her breath catch in her throat. There, beneath the harsh stadium lights, with thousands of spectators watching in shocked silence and millions more viewing at home, Aurora's sides heaved with a different kind of movement. The unmistakable contractions of labor. The foal was coming, here on the track, under the unforgiving glare of the lights that transformed night into artificial day. She's in labor, Ellie said, her voice breaking as she looked up at the veterinarian. The foal is coming now. Dr. Winter's face paled under the harsh stadium lights. We need to get her to the clinic immediately. There's no time, Ellie replied, seeing another powerful contraction ripple across Aurora's heaving sides. This is happening right now. The vet hesitated only a moment before nodding grimly. "You're right. Let's set up a perimeter. I need space and quiet." Track officials were already erecting temporary barriers, creating a small island of privacy in the middle of the track. The remaining horses had been guided to the finish line, the race officially over, though no one seemed to care about the results anymore. The jockeys dismounted, many of them remaining nearby, their colorful silks bright against the dark night, their faces solemn. From the stands, thousands of spectators watched in hushed fascination. The track announcer, unsure how to proceed in this unprecedented situation, was providing periodic updates in a subdued tone, asking for calm and respect. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we're witnessing tonight is something extraordinary. Aurora, one of our finest racing mares, appears to be giving birth right here on the track. Medical personnel are attending to her, and we ask for your patience and quiet at this time." Ellie barely registered any of it. Her world had narrowed to Aurora, whose eyes were rolling in fear and pain. She stroked the mare's neck, murmuring reassurances that she hoped would penetrate the animal's distress. "I'm here, girl. I'm right here with you. You're not alone." Dr. Winters was quickly assembling the necessary supplies from his emergency kit, his movements efficient despite the pressure. Two stable hands who had worked with Aurora joined them, following Ellie's quiet instructions to position themselves where they could assist. "Do you know how far along she is?" Dr. Winters asked as he pulled on gloves. 9 months, maybe a little more," Ellie replied, her voice steadier now that she had a task to focus on. "The foal should be fully developed." A commotion behind the barriers drew Ellie's attention momentarily. Maxwell Stone was arguing with security, demanding to be let through. His face was flushed with anger, his expensive suit looking out of place amid the dirt and drama of the track. "That's my horse," he shouted. "I have a right to be there." Ellie turned away, blocking out his voice. Aurora needed her complete attention now. The birth progressed with startling speed. Perhaps it was the adrenaline from the race, or perhaps Aurora simply knew that she needed to deliver quickly, but within minutes the first signs of the foal appeared. "I can see the amniotic sac," Dr. Winters announced. "And, yes, there are 2 front hooves. Good presentation so far." Ellie felt a surge of hope. A proper presentation meant fewer complications. She moved to Aurora's head, continuing to stroke and comfort her, as the mare pushed with remarkable strength for an animal that had just collapsed from exhaustion. The crowd had fallen completely silent now, the only sounds the labored breathing of the mare and the soft encouragements from Ellie and the vet. Even Maxwell had stopped shouting, watching with a mixture of fury and fascination from behind the barrier. With one powerful contraction, the foal's head emerged, followed quickly by its shoulders. Dr. Winters worked efficiently, supporting the newborn's weight as Aurora gathered her strength for the final push. "Almost there," Ellie whispered. "You're doing so well, Aurora. So well." With a last tremendous effort, Aurora delivered her foal onto the soft dirt of the racetrack. The tiny creature lay motionless for a heart-stopping moment, covered in birth fluids, its coat slick and dark in the artificial light. Dr. Winters immediately cleared the foal's nostrils and mouth, then began rubbing its chest vigorously. "Come on, little one," he muttered. "Take a breath." Ellie held her own breath, her hand still resting on Aurora's neck, feeling the mare's exhaustion and concern. The seconds stretched, unbearably long. Then, miraculously, the foal's ribs expanded in a shuddering gasp. A collective sigh of relief seemed to ripple through the entire stadium. The foal took another breath, stronger this time, and then another. "It's a colt," Dr. Winters announced, a rare smile breaking across his professional demeanor. "And he's breathing well." As if to confirm this assessment, the newborn raised his head slightly, blinking in confusion at the strange world he'd entered, so different from what nature had intended for a foal's first glimpse of life. No quiet stable, no soft meadow, but a racetrack under blazing lights with thousands of strangers watching from a distance. Aurora, somehow sensing her foal was alive despite her exhaustion, twisted her head to look at her baby. A soft, nickering sound escaped her, the first communication between mother and son. It was then that Ellie noticed something remarkable about the colt. While still damp from birth, his coat was beginning to dry in patches, revealing a color that made her breath catch. Pure white, not the light gray that often darkens as a foal matures, but a true snow white that seemed to glow under the stadium lights. "Look at his color," one of the stable hands whispered, awe evident in his voice. Dr. Winters glanced up from his examination. "Albino, maybe? We'll know more when he's fully dry, but that's extremely rare in thoroughbreds." The colt, gaining strength with each passing moment, made his first attempt to move. His spindly legs splayed awkwardly, but there was a determination in his movements that reminded Ellie forcefully of his mother. A movement at the barrier caught Ellie's attention. Maxwell Stone had finally been allowed through, and he approached slowly, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene. His valuable racehorse lying exhausted on the track, the newborn foal struggling to stand, and Ellie kneeling in the dirt beside them both. "Is the mare going to make it?" he asked, his voice stripped of its usual arrogance. Dr. Winters nodded without looking up from his work. "I believe so. She's exhausted, and there may be injuries from the fall, but her vital signs are stabilizing." Maxwell's gaze shifted to the white colt. Something flashed in his eyes, calculation perhaps, or the recognition of a new opportunity. "And the foal? He's healthy?" "Remarkably so, considering the circumstances," Dr. Winters replied. "We'll need to transport them both to the clinic for proper care, but he appears strong." Maxwell nodded slowly, then turned to Ellie. "You knew," he said simply. It wasn't a question. Ellie met his gaze steadily. "I tried to tell you." A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft sounds of the foal as he continued his determined efforts to stand. Maxwell opened his mouth to speak again, but was interrupted by a sudden gasp from the crowd. The colt had managed to get his front legs under him and was now pushing up with his back legs. In one fluid, improbable movement, he rose to a standing position, far sooner than any newborn foal should be able to manage. But it wasn't just that he was standing that drew the reaction. As he rose, the stadium lights caught his coat, now drying rapidly in the warm night air. The white wasn't just white. It seemed to shimmer with an iridescent quality that defied explanation, catching the light and reflecting it back in subtle rainbow hues. And on his forehead, revealed now as he lifted his head proudly, was a perfect star-shaped marking in deep, rich black, a stunning contrast to his luminous coat. Photographers who had been documenting the dramatic birth scrambled to capture images of the extraordinary colt. Flashbulbs popped across the stadium, and the crowd's hushed silence gave way to a growing murmur of amazement. "My God," Maxwell breathed, business calculations momentarily forgotten in the face of pure wonder. "What is he?" Dr. Winters shook his head in amazement. "In 30 years of veterinary practice, I've never seen anything like this. A newborn shouldn't be able to stand so quickly, especially after a birth like this one." The colt took a tentative step toward his mother, his movements graceful despite his newborn awkwardness. Aurora, still lying on her side, lifted her head to nuzzle her foal as he approached. The moment between mother and son was so tender that even the hardened track workers looked away, feeling as though they were intruding on something sacred. "We need to get them both to the clinic," Dr. Winters said, breaking the spell. "Aurora needs proper examination, and the foal should be in a controlled environment." Maxwell nodded, his business sense returning. "I'll have my trailer brought around. The best care, whatever it costs." He turned to Ellie, his expression now calculating. You'll accompany them, of course. You seem to have a special understanding with Aurora." The words were polite, but Ellie heard the underlying message. Her deception about the pregnancy wasn't forgotten, merely set aside for the moment. "Yes, sir," she replied simply, turning back to Aurora. The logistics of moving a weakened mare and her newborn foal from the middle of a racetrack proved challenging. A special equine ambulance was brought in, and with careful coordination between Ellie, Dr. Winters, and the stable hands, they managed to help Aurora to her feet. She stood shakily, clearly favoring her right front leg, likely injured in the fall. The colt, astonishingly, needed little assistance. He stayed close to his mother, his legs growing steadier with each passing minute. When it came time to load them into the ambulance, he followed Aurora without hesitation, as if he understood exactly what was needed of him. "Have you ever seen a foal this advanced?" Ellie asked Dr. Winters in a hushed voice as they watched the pair settle into the transport. The vet shook his head slightly. "Never. It's as if he was born with weeks of development already behind him. And that coat, I've never seen anything quite like it." Under the ambulance's interior lights, the colt's unusual coloring was even more apparent. His coat had dried to a white so pure it seemed to emit its own soft glow, while the black star on his forehead stood out in stark, perfect contrast. His eyes, now fully open, were a deep, unusual blue, not the pale blue of some newborns that would later darken, but a rich sapphire that seemed too knowing for a creature just hours old. As the ambulance pulled away from the track, Ellie became aware of the commotion they were leaving behind. The crowd was still there, no one having left despite the late hour. News crews had arrived, setting up equipment at the track's edge. The story of Aurora's collapse and the miraculous birth of her unusual foal was spreading rapidly, already becoming something larger than just a racing incident. At the veterinary clinic, a team was waiting for them. Aurora was taken to a spacious examination stall, while the colt stayed close by, seemingly unwilling to be separated from his mother, even for examination. "He's perfectly proportioned," remarked Dr. Martinez, the clinic's specialist in neonatal foals, as she checked the colt. "Weight, height, muscle tone, all exceptional. If I didn't know better, I'd say this was a week-old foal, not one born hours ago." Aurora's examination revealed a sprained tendon in her right foreleg, a significant injury, but not career-ending with proper treatment. The real concern was her overall condition after the stress of racing while heavily pregnant, followed by the fall and birth. "She needs complete rest," Dr. Winters told Maxwell, who had arrived at the clinic shortly after them. "Minimum 6 months, possibly longer." Maxwell's jaw tightened briefly, but he nodded. "Whatever she needs, she's proven her worth." His gaze drifted to the white colt, who was nursing vigorously. "And her foal. Well, he might be worth more than all my other horses combined." Ellie felt a chill at his words. Of course, Maxwell would see the dollar signs, the marketing potential, the breeding possibilities. To him, the miraculous birth wasn't a wonder, it was an investment opportunity. By morning, the story had exploded across social media and news outlets. Track Miracle was trending worldwide, with the grainy cell phone videos of the birth and the colt's first steps being shared millions of times. Reporters gathered outside the clinic, hoping for updates or glimpses of the unusual foal. "We should name him," Ellie said to Aurora, as she checked on the mare and foal in the quiet hours of dawn, the only time the clinic was relatively peaceful. "Something fitting for how special he is." Aurora nudged Ellie's hand gently as if in agreement. The colt, who had been exploring the edges of the stall with curious determination, came trotting back to them, his movement already smoother and more coordinated than should be possible. "Miracle feels too obvious," Ellie mused, running her hand along the colt's shimmering coat. "Though that's certainly what you are." "How about Lumina?" The voice came from the stall door, where Dr. Martinez stood with a small bucket of fresh water. It means light in Latin. Seems fitting for a foal that shines like he does. Ellie smiled, watching as the colt raised his head at the sound of the name. Lumina. I like it. What do you think, little one? Is that your name? The colt let out a soft, nickering sound and pressed his muzzle against Ellie's palm, his blue eyes seeming to look straight through her. Lumina it is, she whispered. Maxwell arrived mid-morning, accompanied by a professional photographer and a man Ellie didn't recognize. Expensive suit, calculating eyes, a tablet clutched in his manicured hands. My publicity manager, Maxwell explained curtly. We need proper images, controlled messaging. This is going to be big, Ellie. Bigger than racing. Ellie stood protectively near Aurora and Lumina as the photographer began setting up equipment. Sir, they've been through a lot. Is this really necessary so soon? Maxwell's expression hardened. Don't forget your position, Miss Carter. I appreciate your care for my horses, but business decisions remain mine to make. The publicity manager stepped forward, his smile practiced. We're thinking exclusive photo spreads in major magazines, carefully selected television appearances once the foal is a bit older, merchandise licensing. He tapped rapidly on his tablet. The miracle foal narrative has enormous appeal across demographics. While they talked, Lumina had moved to stand beside Ellie, his small body pressing against her legs as if seeking protection. There was something so trusting in the gesture that Ellie felt her throat tighten with emotion. I understand the business perspective, she said carefully. But Lumina's welfare has to come first. He's not just a marketing opportunity. Lumina? Maxwell raised an eyebrow. You've named him already? It suits him, Dr. Martinez interjected, entering the stall with medical supplies. And it's good for him to recognize a name early. Maxwell considered this, then nodded slowly. Lumina. Yes, that works well for branding too. Light from darkness, a star born on the track. He turned to his publicity manager. Make a note of that angle. As they continued discussing marketing strategies, Ellie knelt beside Lumina, whispering into his alert ear. I'll make sure you're more than just a business asset. I promise. The colt turned his sapphire gaze toward her, and for a fleeting moment, Ellie could have sworn she saw understanding and something more, something impossible in those eyes. Then Lumina blinked, and he was just an extraordinary foal again, sticking close to his mother's side. By the end of Lumina's first week, it was clear to everyone at the clinic that they were dealing with something extraordinary. The colt had grown at an accelerated rate, already looking more like a month-old foal than a newborn. His coordination was impeccable, his awareness uncanny. He seemed to understand instructions the first time they were given, responding not just to tone, but to specific words. It's as if he's been here before, Dr. Martinez remarked one afternoon, watching Lumina navigate a small obstacle course they'd set up in the recovery paddock, something normally used for much older foals in physical therapy. Aurora had recovered enough to be moved to a larger stall with outdoor access. Her tendon injury was healing well, though she would need several more months of rest before any decision could be made about her racing future. She watched her unusual son with what Ellie could only describe as pride, her intelligent eyes following his every movement. The media frenzy had not died down. If anything, it had intensified as more professional footage of Lumina's birth circulated. The image of the glowing white foal standing minutes after birth under the harsh track lights had become iconic, appearing on the cover of sporting magazines and trending repeatedly on social media. Maxwell Stone had wasted no time capitalizing on the attention. He'd hired round-the-clock security for the clinic, signed exclusive coverage deals with major networks, and was in negotiations for a documentary series. He visited daily, often bringing potential sponsors or business associates to see his miraculous investment. We're looking at a clothing line, children's books, stuffed animals. The possibilities are endless, he told Ellie during one such visit, watching as Lumina trotted gracefully around the paddock. People are drawn to stories of hope, of the impossible becoming possible. That's what Lumina represents. Ellie nodded politely, though her concerns grew with each new commercial plan Maxwell unveiled. She had become Lumina's primary caretaker, staying at the clinic most nights and developing a bond with the colt that went beyond her professional responsibilities. There was something about Lumina that called to her, a wisdom in his blue eyes that made her feel he understood far more than any animal should. 10 days after his birth, Ellie arrived at the clinic to find an unfamiliar car in the parking lot, an understated sedan rather than the luxury vehicles Maxwell and his associates typically drove. Inside, she discovered a woman in conversation with Dr. Winters, tall, silver-haired, with a quiet authority in her posture. "Ah, Ellie," Dr. Winters said, gesturing her over. "This is Dr. Helen Tate from the University Research Center. She's a specialist in equine genetics and development." Dr. Tate extended her hand, her grip firm and professional. "Miss Carter, I've been hoping to meet you. I understand you've been working closely with the foal." "Yes," Ellie replied cautiously. "I've been with Lumina since his birth. May I ask why you're interested?" The scientist's expression remained neutral. Professional curiosity primarily. A foal with Lumina's characteristics, the accelerated development, unusual coloration, apparent cognitive abilities, represents a significant deviation from established patterns of equine development. I'd like to study him, with Mr. Stone's permission, of course. Ellie felt a protective instinct rise within her. What kind of study? Non-invasive observational research, along with some basic physical measurements and perhaps blood work for genetic analysis, Dr. Tate assured her. Nothing that would cause any distress. Before Ellie could respond, Maxwell arrived, immediately gravitating toward the newcomer with the instinct of a businessman recognizing an opportunity. "Dr. Tate, I presume. We spoke on the phone. Fascinating proposal you have." The scientist nodded. "Thank you for considering it, Mr. Stone. As I was explaining to Miss Carter, Lumina represents a unique research opportunity. And potentially a lucrative one, if your theories prove correct," Maxwell added with a knowing smile. Dr. Tate's expression didn't change. "Science and commerce often walk hand in hand, Mr. Stone. I believe my research could help explain Lumina's extraordinary nature, which would certainly enhance his value from a breeding perspective." Ellie listened to their conversation with growing unease. They spoke of Lumina as if he were a specimen, a curiosity to be dissected and categorized, rather than a living being with his own needs and dignity. "I should check on Aurora and Lumina," she said, excusing herself from their discussion. In the paddock, Lumina spotted her immediately, trotting over with his now familiar grace. At just 10 days old, he already stood nearly as tall as a 3-month-old foal, his white coat gleaming in the morning sun. The black star on his forehead seemed more defined each day, stark against his luminous coloring. "Hey there, beautiful boy," Ellie murmured, running her hand along his neck. "They're making big plans for you out there." Lumina nudged her gently with his muzzle, then turned his head toward the clinic building where Maxwell and Dr. Tate were now visible through the window, still deep in conversation. The colt's ears flattened slightly, and he shifted his position, placing himself between Ellie and the building in what almost seemed like a protective gesture. "You understand, don't you?" Ellie whispered, a chill running through her despite the warm day. "Sometimes I think you understand everything." Later that afternoon, Dr. Tate began her preliminary observations, taking measurements and photographs while Ellie stood nearby, watchful. Lumina tolerated the attention with unusual patience for a young foal, though he flinched when the scientist attempted to take hair samples from his mane. Remarkable muscle development for his age, Dr. Tate noted, recording data on her tablet. And the coat pigmentation, I've never seen anything quite like it. It almost appears to contain reflective properties at the cellular level. When Dr. Tate finally left, promising to return with more specialized equipment, Ellie found herself alone with Lumina in the fading light of evening. Aurora was resting in her stall after her daily therapy session, and the clinic staff had gone home, leaving just the night security guard at the entrance. "What are we going to do with you?" Ellie asked softly, sitting on a bale of hay while Lumina explored the paddock. "Everyone wants a piece of you, and you're just getting started in this world." As if in response, Lumina stopped his exploration and returned to her side. He lowered his head, gently resting it in her lap, a gesture so deliberate, so un-Foal-like that Ellie caught her breath. In that quiet moment, with the sun setting beyond the paddock fence, something extraordinary happened. Lumina raised his head, his sapphire eyes meeting hers directly, and Ellie felt a sensation she couldn't explain, like a whisper in her mind, not words exactly, but a clear impression of thoughts not her own. Trust, safety, together. Ellie jerked backward, nearly falling off the hay bale. "What was that?" she whispered, her heart racing. Lumina merely blinked, those intelligent eyes still fixed on hers, patient and waiting. Gathering her courage, Ellie reached out a trembling hand to touch the star marking on his forehead. Was that you?" The impression came again, stronger this time. "Yes. Help." Ellie stumbled backward, her mind reeling. She pressed her palms against her temples, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "This is impossible," she whispered. "I'm overtired. I'm imagining things." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. The sensation had been too distinct, too separate from her own thoughts. She looked at Lumina, who stood watching her with those impossible blue eyes, his posture calm and patient, as if waiting for her to accept what her rational mind was fighting against. "You can communicate?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible. Lumina took a step toward her, and again she felt that strange sensation, not exactly words, but concepts, emotions, and images flowing into her consciousness. Yes, different, special. A wave of dizziness washed over Ellie. She sank back onto the hay bale, trying to steady her breathing. "How is this possible? You're just a foal. You're just 10 days old." Lumina's response came as a series of impressions rather than words. Star-filled skies, ancient forests, racing herds beneath moonlight, a sense of time stretching both backward and forward. It was overwhelming, fragments of something vast that her human mind couldn't fully comprehend. "I don't understand," Ellie admitted, her voice shaking. The colt approached and gently nuzzled her hand, sending a simpler message this time. "Friend, safe with you." Despite her shock, Ellie felt a profound sense of wonder replacing her fear. She reached out tentatively, stroking Lumina's gleaming coat. "Yes," she whispered, "you're safe with me." That night, Ellie barely slept, her mind churning with the implications of what she'd experienced. By morning, a part of her had begun to doubt. Perhaps it had been a hallucination brought on by stress and exhaustion. But when she arrived at the clinic and Lumina greeted her with a soft, nickering sound, she felt that now familiar touch on her consciousness. Morning. Happy. Ellie glanced around quickly, making sure no one had noticed her startled reaction. "We need to be careful," she whispered to Lumina, scratching behind his ears. "I don't think anyone would understand this." The day brought new complications. Dr. Tate returned with equipment and 2 research assistants, setting up monitoring devices around Lumina's paddock. Maxwell arrived shortly after, accompanied by a film crew for what he described as preliminary footage for the documentary. We're thinking of a 6-part series, he explained to Ellie, who was trying to keep Aurora calm amid the commotion. The miracle of Lumina has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Before Ellie could respond, Dr. Tate approached with a concerned expression. Mr. Stone, this level of activity could interfere with my observations. The foal's behavior will be altered with so many strangers present. Maxwell waved his hand dismissively. They'll be done in a few hours. Your scientific needs are important, Doctor, but so is building public interest. It's all part of the bigger picture. Ellie caught a flicker of irritation crossing Dr. Tate's composed features before the scientist nodded stiffly and returned to her equipment. There was clearly tension between the scientific and commercial interests surrounding Lumina, with the foal himself caught in the middle. Throughout the day, as cameras rolled and measurements were taken, Ellie maintained a watchful presence. She could feel Lumina's discomfort at being the center of so much attention, though he behaved with remarkable patience for a young foal. Occasionally, when no one was looking, he would catch her eye and send a brief impression, usually expressing frustration or asking how much longer the intrusion would last. By late afternoon, the film crew had finally packed up, and Dr. Tate was reviewing data with her assistants. Ellie took advantage of the relative quiet to lead Lumina to the far corner of the paddock, away from prying eyes and ears. I need to understand, she whispered, keeping one hand on his neck. Where did you come from? How can you communicate like this? Lumina's response came as a complex series of impressions. Ancient bloodlines, stars falling to earth, horses running through time itself, wisdom passed down through generations. It was fragmented and symbolic, difficult for Ellie's human mind to fully grasp. Are you trying to tell me you're not just a normal horse? She asked, struggling to interpret the images. More than horse, old soul, new form. Ellie tried to process this. An old soul, like reincarnation? You've lived before? Lumina sent an impression of affirmation, along with images of horses throughout history, ancient battle chargers, nomadic steppe ponies, racing thoroughbreds, all connected by a thread of consciousness that seemed to transcend time. But why now? Why here? Ellie pressed, fascinated despite her lingering disbelief. Before Lumina could respond, Dr. Tate's voice interrupted them. Miss Carter, is everything all right? Ellie turned, trying to hide her startled expression. Yes, just checking on him after all the excitement today. He seems a bit overwhelmed. Dr. Tate approached slowly, her keen eyes studying both Ellie and the foal. I've been observing your interactions with him. There's something unusual about the way he responds to you, almost as if there's a deeper level of communication occurring. Ellie felt her heart race. He's just comfortable with me. I've been with him since birth. Perhaps, Dr. Tate said, not sounding entirely convinced. Though in my years of research, I've never seen a bond form so quickly or so profoundly, particularly with a foal showing such advanced development. She paused, studying Lumina with scientific curiosity. It's almost as if he understands language at a conceptual level. Foals are smarter than people give them credit for, Ellie replied, trying to keep her voice casual. Dr. Tate nodded slowly. Indeed. But Lumina, he's something else entirely. She hesitated, then added in a lower voice. Mr. Stone is primarily interested in the commercial aspects of Lumina's uniqueness. My interests are scientific. But I wonder, Miss Carter, what your priority is when it comes to this remarkable animal? The question caught Ellie off guard. My priority is his well-being, she answered honestly. Everything else is secondary. Something shifted in Dr. Tate's expression, a softening, perhaps even approval. I thought as much. She glanced around, ensuring they weren't overheard. You should know that the tests I've run so far show some anomalies in his cellular structure. Nothing concerning from a health perspective, but definitely unprecedented. I'll be conducting more specialized analysis tomorrow." After Dr. Tate left, Ellie turned back to Lumina, a new worry forming. "If they discover how truly different you are," she whispered. Lumina's response was immediate and clear. "Danger. Hide truth. Not ready." "Who's not ready? Them or you?" Ellie asked. The impression she received contained elements of both, humanity not prepared for what Lumina represented, and Lumina himself still developing, still becoming whatever he was meant to be. That evening, after everyone had gone and only the night security remained at their post, Ellie sat in Aurora's stall watching mother and son together. Aurora seemed to understand her foal's special nature, treating him with a kind of deference unusual for a mare with her offspring. "What am I going to do?" Ellie murmured, more to herself than to either horse. "They're all making plans for you, studies, documentaries, merchandise, but none of them know what you really are, and I'm not sure I do either." Lumina approached her, his movements as graceful as ever. At just 10 days old, he already carried himself with the dignity of a much older horse. He touched his muzzle to her shoulder, and a wave of emotion flowed from him. Trust, affection, and a certainty that their paths were meant to intertwine. Together. Find way. Truth comes. 2 weeks after Lumina's birth, the clinic had transformed into something resembling a research facility crossed with a media production studio. Maxwell had arranged for a dedicated filming space complete with proper lighting and backdrops, while Dr. Tate's equipment now occupied an entire room adjacent to the recovery paddock. The peaceful healing environment had been replaced by a constant buzz of activity. "The blood work results are unlike anything I've ever seen," Dr. Tate told Ellie one morning, her voice low despite the empty corridor. "His cellular structure shows extraordinary regenerative capabilities, and there are proteins present that don't match any known equine genetic markers." Ellie tried to keep her expression neutral, though her heart raced. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means," Dr. Tate replied, "that Lumina isn't just an unusual foal. He represents a genetic variation that could revolutionize our understanding of equine biology." She hesitated before adding, "I've only shared the preliminary findings with Mr. Stone. He's quite excited about the implications." "The commercial implications, you mean?" Ellie said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Dr. Tate's lips tightened into a thin line. "Yes, he's already discussing breeding rights, tissue banking, even potential pharmaceutical applications." She studied Ellie's face carefully. "Miss Carter, may I speak frankly?" Ellie nodded, wary but curious. "I've been observing not just Lumina, but your interactions with him. There's something unprecedented about your connection. The way he responds to you, the way he seems to anticipate your needs before you express them." Dr. Tate leaned closer. "Is there something more happening between you two? Something beyond the normal human-animal bond?" The question hung in the air, dangerous and tempting. For a moment, Ellie considered confiding in the scientist. Sharing the burden of Lumina's secret would be a relief. But Lumina's warning echoed in her mind. Danger. Hide truth. Not ready. "We've been together since his first moments," Ellie answered carefully. "That creates a special bond, especially with an intelligent foal like Lumina." Dr. Tate didn't look entirely convinced, but nodded slowly. "Well, if you ever observe anything unusual in his behavior, I hope you'll feel comfortable sharing it with me, for scientific purposes only, of course." Later that day, Maxwell arrived with a new entourage, marketing executives from a major sportswear company interested in a Lumina line of athletic apparel. Ellie watched from a distance as they discussed concepts, Maxwell's voice carrying across the paddock. "We're thinking miraculous performance as the tagline," one executive suggested. His story is all about defying limitations, pushing boundaries, exactly what our brand represents. Perfect, Maxwell agreed. We'll need him for a photo shoot next week. Something dramatic, maybe with special lighting to capture that unusual coat of his. Ellie felt a surge of protective anger. Lumina was barely 2 weeks old, still developing, still vulnerable despite his advanced abilities. And all Maxwell could think about was how to monetize him. That evening, after the visitors had gone, Ellie found Maxwell reviewing contracts in the clinic's small conference room. "Mr. Stone," she began, "I'm concerned about the amount of activity around Lumina. He's still very young, and all these people, the equipment, the constant handling, it could be detrimental to his development." Maxwell looked up, his expression calculating. "Your concern is noted, Miss Carter, but unnecessary. Dr. Tate assures me that Lumina's development is proceeding at an extraordinary pace. He's physically more advanced than a typical month-old foal already. That doesn't mean he's emotionally ready for this level of disruption," Ellie countered. "He needs stability, routine, and plenty of quiet time with his mother." Maxwell set down his pen, studying her with newfound interest. "You've become quite attached to him, haven't you?" "I care about his well-being. That's my job." "Indeed it is, and you do it admirably." Maxwell leaned back in his chair. "Which is why I'm considering a significant bonus for you, along with a new position, Lumina's personal handler with increased responsibilities and, of course, increased compensation." The offer caught Ellie off guard. "I don't understand." "It's simple. Lumina trusts you. He performs better when you're present. That makes you valuable to his development and to my plans for him." Maxwell smiled thinly. "Consider it a promotion. You'll travel with him for appearances, oversee his daily care, be the consistent presence in his life as we build his brand." Ellie struggled to keep her expression neutral. The offer would allow her to stay close to Lumina, to protect him as his public profile grew, but it also meant becoming complicit in Maxwell's commercialization of the extraordinary foal. "I'll consider it," she said finally. "Don't consider too long," Maxwell replied. "Opportunities like this don't come around often." That night, Ellie stayed late at the clinic, sitting in Lumina's stall as she had every evening since his birth. Aurora dozed in the corner, her recovery progressing steadily, while Lumina stood beside Ellie, his head resting lightly against her shoulder. "What am I supposed to do?" she whispered. "If I take Maxwell's offer, I can stay with you, protect you. But I'd be helping him turn you into a commodity, a spectacle." Lumina's response flowed into her mind, gentle but clear. "Stay close, need you, others coming." Ellie frowned. "Others? What others?" The images Lumina shared were fragmented but disturbing. People in clinical white, sharp instruments, confined spaces, fear and separation. Whether this was a premonition or simply Lumina's fear, Ellie couldn't tell, but the intensity of the emotion behind the images was unmistakable. "I won't let anyone hurt you," she promised, stroking his luminous coat. "But I don't know how to protect you from what's coming. Maxwell's plans are getting bigger by the day, and Dr. Tate is discovering things about you that—" She trailed off, the implications too overwhelming to voice. Aurora stirred in the corner, rising to approach them. The mare's movements were still careful, her injured leg not yet fully healed, but there was a determination in her stride. She positioned herself protectively beside her foal, her intelligent eyes fixed on Ellie as if assessing her intentions. "I'm trying to help him," Ellie told Aurora softly. "I promise." To her astonishment, she felt a faint echo of the same communication she experienced with Lumina, not as clear or complex, but unmistakably there, a sense of acknowledgement, of cautious trust. "You too?" Ellie breathed, looking between mother and son. "Is this something you can both do?" Lumina's response came with impressions of bloodlines, of abilities passed down through generations, dormant until now. Mother knows. Different way. Same heart. Ellie sat back, trying to absorb this new revelation. Not only was Lumina capable of this extraordinary communication, but Aurora possessed some version of the same ability, perhaps less developed, but present nonetheless. "This changes everything," Ellie whispered. "If it's genetic, if it's something that could be passed to future offspring." She didn't need to finish the thought. If Maxwell or Dr. Tate discovered the full extent of what made Lumina unique, the foal would never know freedom again. He would become a research subject, a breeding machine, a biological treasure trove to be exploited. As if sensing her thoughts, Lumina pressed closer, sending a wave of calm determination. Time coming. Choice soon. Trust. Aurora nickered softly in agreement, her eyes never leaving Ellie's face. In that moment, surrounded by the gentle warmth of these two extraordinary beings, Ellie made her decision. Whatever it took, whatever the personal cost, she would protect Lumina, not just his physical well-being, but his right to become whatever he was meant to be, free from exploitation and confinement. "I'll take the job," she said quietly, "and then we'll figure out what comes next. Together." By the time Lumina reached 1 month of age, he had grown to the size of a 6-month-old foal. His gleaming white coat continued to draw gasps from visitors, seeming to capture and reflect light in ways that defied explanation. The black star on his forehead had become more pronounced, with subtle swirls within the marking that gave it an almost hypnotic quality when viewed directly. Ellie had officially accepted Maxwell's offer, becoming Lumina's dedicated handler with a salary that far exceeded anything she'd earned before. The promotion came with a contract full of confidentiality clauses and commitments to Maxwell's vision for Lumina's future, terms that made Ellie's skin crawl even as she signed her name. "You've made the right choice," Maxwell had assured her, sliding the signed document into a leather portfolio. "We're going to make history with this foal." Now, as dawn broke over the clinic's grounds, Ellie led Lumina through his morning exercise routine. They had developed a system that appeared normal to observers, Ellie giving verbal commands, Lumina responding with typical equine behavior, while beneath the surface, they communicated in their own silent language. "Too many people today?" Lumina asked as they completed a figure-8 pattern in the training ring. "Yes," Ellie replied softly, mindful of the security cameras Maxwell had installed throughout the facility. "Another photo shoot, and Dr. Tate wants to run new tests." A wave of resignation flowed from Lumina, tinged with determination. At just 1 month old, he had already learned to tolerate the constant intrusions into his life, the cameras, the examinations, the parade of strangers who came to marvel at the miracle foal. "We just need to get through today," Ellie assured him, running her hand along his neck in a gesture that appeared affectionate but also allowed for clearer communication. "Then maybe we can have some quiet time." The marketing team arrived first, transforming a section of the paddock into an impromptu photography studio. They brought special lighting equipment designed to capture the unusual qualities of Lumina's coat, along with a professional animal photographer who specialized in creating dynamic images. "We want motion shots," the creative director explained to Ellie. Lumina running, his mane catching the light, something dramatic and powerful. Ellie nodded, translating these requirements to Lumina through their silent connection. Despite her discomfort with the situation, she had to admit there was something magnificent about Lumina in motion. He moved with a grace that seemed impossible for his age, his stride already showing the makings of a champion racehorse. For nearly 2 hours, Lumina performed flawlessly, following Ellie's cues while the photographer captured hundreds of images. By the time they finished, even the jaded marketing team seemed impressed by the foal's intelligence and cooperation. It's like he understands exactly what we need, the photographer remarked as he reviewed the images on his camera. I've worked with trained horses for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Ellie smiled non-committally. If only they knew. Dr. Tate arrived as the marketing team was packing up, her expression serious as she approached Ellie. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "In private." Ellie's stomach tightened with apprehension. She arranged for one of the stable hands to walk Lumina for a few minutes while she followed Dr. Tate to the research room. Once inside, the scientist closed the door and turned to face Ellie. "I've completed the advanced genetic analysis on Lumina's blood and tissue samples," she said without preamble. "The results are, well, I hardly know how to categorize them." "What do you mean?" Ellie asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Dr. Tate moved to her computer and pulled up a series of complex charts and images. "This is a normal equine DNA sequence," she explained, pointing to one image. "And this is Lumina's." She indicated a second image that, even to Ellie's untrained eye, showed significant differences. "There are structures here that don't match any known equine genetics. In fact, they don't fully match any mammalian DNA patterns we have on record." Ellie swallowed hard. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Dr. Tate replied, lowering her voice further, "that Lumina appears to have genetic markers that are entirely unique, possibly even representing an evolutionary leap or—" She hesitated. "This will sound absurd, but the closest analogy I can think of is adaptive mutations we might expect to see after thousands of years of selective evolution, appearing spontaneously in a single generation." The implications hung in the air between them. Dr. Tate studied Ellie's face, clearly looking for a reaction. "Have you told Maxwell?" Ellie finally asked. "Not yet. I wanted to confirm my findings with additional tests." Dr. Tate leaned back against her desk. "But there's something else, something I haven't documented officially. During my observations, I've noticed patterns in Lumina's brain activity that suggest advanced cognitive functions, particularly when he's interacting with you." Ellie felt her heart rate accelerate. Many horses form strong bonds with their handlers. "This is different," Dr. Tate insisted. "The synchronization patterns I'm seeing suggest a form of communication happening at a level we don't yet understand." She took a deep breath. "Miss Carter, Ellie, I believe you know more than you're saying, and I want you to know that my interest is scientific, not commercial. Whatever Lumina represents, it could change our understanding of interspecies communication, of consciousness itself." For a moment, Ellie was tempted to confide in the scientist. Dr. Tate seemed genuinely interested in understanding Lumina, not just exploiting him. But years of working in an industry where horses were treated as commodities had taught Ellie caution. "I care about Lumina," she said carefully. "That's all." Dr. Tate held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But remember, Mr. Stone is primarily interested in Lumina's market value. When I present these findings to him, which I'll have to do eventually, his reaction may not prioritize Lumina's well-being." The warning was clear, and Ellie appreciated it even as it intensified her fears. "Thank you for telling me first." When she returned to Lumina, the foal immediately sensed her distress. As they walked back to the stall area, away from prying eyes, he pressed close to her side. "Bad news." "Dr. Tate knows you're different," Ellie whispered. "Really different. She's found things in your DNA and your brain patterns. She hasn't told Maxwell yet, but she will." A complex wave of emotions flowed from Lumina, concern, resignation, and something deeper that Ellie couldn't quite interpret. Time shorter now, plan needed. "What plan?" Ellie asked. "What do you mean?" Before Lumina could respond, they rounded the corner to find Maxwell waiting by Aurora's stall, engaged in conversation with a man Ellie didn't recognize. Tall and thin, with silver hair and expensive clothing, the stranger carried himself with an air of authority that made even Maxwell seem deferential. "Ah, here they are now," Maxwell said, gesturing toward Ellie and Lumina. "Dr. Richards, this is Ellie Carter, Lumina's handler, and of course the miracle Foal himself." Dr. Richards turned, his pale eyes assessing Lumina with clinical interest. "Remarkable specimen," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent Ellie couldn't place. "The International Equine Research Consortium is very interested in your findings, Mr. Stone." Maxwell beamed with pride. "As I was saying, we're open to a research partnership, provided the commercial aspects remain under my control." "Of course," Dr. Richards replied smoothly. "Our facility in Switzerland is equipped for comprehensive study while maintaining the subject's value. We could begin preliminary testing within the week if arrangements can be made for transport." Ellie felt the blood drain from her face as she processed what she was hearing. They were discussing sending Lumina to a research facility overseas, separating him from Aurora, from her, from everything familiar. Beside her, Lumina went rigid, his consciousness flooding hers with a single desperate message. Now. Must leave now. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety for Ellie. She went through the motions of her duties, leading Lumina through his afternoon exercises, discussing care routines with the stable hands, even smiling and nodding as Maxwell expanded on his plans for the research partnership with Dr. Richards. But beneath this calm exterior, her mind raced with desperate calculations. Switzerland, an international research facility. Once Lumina was there, she would lose any ability to protect him. He would become a test subject, a scientific curiosity to be studied, measured, and ultimately exploited for whatever secrets his extraordinary body contained. As twilight descended over the clinic grounds, Ellie found herself alone in the feed room, mechanically measuring out Lumina's evening ration while her thoughts churned. The sound of the door opening made her jump. "You've been quiet today," Dr. Tate observed, leaning against the doorframe. "Everything all right?" Ellie forced a smile. "Just tired. It's been a long day." Dr. Tate studied her face for a moment before speaking again. "I met Dr. Richards earlier. Did Maxwell tell you about the plans for Lumina?" "Some of it," Ellie replied carefully. "A research partnership in Switzerland. The International Equine Research Consortium is well respected in scientific circles," Dr. Tate said, her tone neutral, "but their methods are thorough, and they're not known for prioritizing the comfort of their subjects." Ellie's hand stilled on the feed scoop. "What are you saying?" Dr. Tate glanced over her shoulder to ensure they were alone. "I'm saying that if I were responsible for a being as extraordinary as Lumina, I might have serious reservations about sending him to a facility where scientific discovery outweighs all other considerations." She straightened, adjusting her lab coat. "Just something to think about." After she left, Ellie stood motionless, the implications of Dr. Tate's words sinking in. Had that been a warning? Or something more? Tacit permission, perhaps even encouragement to take action? By the time night fell, Ellie had made her decision. As she performed her final check on Lumina and Aurora, she was already mentally cataloging what she would need: transportation, supplies, a destination where Lumina would be safe. The obstacles seemed insurmountable, but the alternative, watching Lumina be shipped off to become a laboratory specimen, was unthinkable. "I'll be back later," she whispered to Lumina as she left his stall. "Be ready." His response flowed into her mind, calm despite the circumstances. Trust. Waiting. The security at Willow Creek had been significantly enhanced since Lumina's birth. Guards patrolled the perimeter, cameras monitored the stables and paddocks, and access to the areas housing Aurora and Lumina required keycard authorization. But Ellie had been working there long enough to know the gaps in the system. The brief window between shift changes, the cameras that occasionally malfunctioned, the back gate that was rarely monitored after midnight. She drove home to her small apartment, moving through its rooms with mechanical efficiency as she gathered essentials: clothes, savings, identification. The practical part of her mind screamed that what she was contemplating was not just career suicide, but potentially criminal, horse theft on a grand scale, stealing a multi-million-dollar animal from one of the most powerful men in racing. Yet deeper than this practical voice was the certainty that she was making the only choice possible. Lumina had come into her life for a reason. Their connection, inexplicable as it was, created a responsibility she couldn't ignore. At 11:30, Ellie parked her truck a quarter-mile from the clinic's back entrance, hidden by a stand of trees. She approached on foot, using the knowledge gained from years of early morning arrivals and late-night emergencies. The night security guard, Joe, would be making his rounds at the front of the property now, leaving the rear temporarily unmonitored. Her keycard granted her access to the staff entrance. Heart pounding, she slipped inside, keeping to the shadows as she made her way to the stable area. The security cameras were active, but she knew their blind spots, moving from one to the next with careful precision. When she reached Lumina's stall, he was waiting, standing alert with his ears pricked forward. His white coat seemed to glow in the dim light, making Ellie wince at how visible he would be once they were outside. "We need to darken your coat," she whispered, pulling a container of water-soluble dye from her backpack, a product typically used for touch-ups before horse shows. "It'll wash off later, but it might help us get away." Lumina stood perfectly still as she quickly applied the dye, darkening his luminous coat to a muddy gray. The star marking on his forehead she covered with a small patch designed for horses with facial injuries. "Aurora?" The question formed in Ellie's mind, tinged with concern. Ellie glanced toward the mare's adjacent stall. Aurora was watching them, her intelligent eyes reflecting understanding despite the obvious distress of seeing her foal being prepared for departure. "She can't come with us," Ellie whispered, her voice breaking. "She's still healing, and she'd be too recognizable. She'd slow us down, make it impossible to get away." The pain of this reality flowed between all three of them, a shared grief that needed no words. Aurora approached the dividing wall between the stalls, extending her muzzle toward her son. Lumina stretched to meet her, their breath mingling in the quiet darkness. Something passed between them, a private communication that Ellie could sense but not fully access. "She understands. Protecting me. Her choice too." Ellie felt tears spill down her cheeks as she realized that Aurora was willingly sacrificing her connection to her foal to ensure his safety. The depth of the mare's understanding and love was overwhelming. "I'll make sure he's safe," Ellie promised Aurora, stroking her soft muzzle. "And maybe someday, when things are different." She couldn't finish the thought. The future was too uncertain, the path ahead too dangerous to make promises she might not be able to keep. Time was running short. Ellie attached a simple halter to Lumina, grateful that his advanced development meant he could move with the coordination of a much older horse. She checked the corridor, then led him quietly from the stall, pausing one last time so he could touch noses with Aurora in farewell. They moved through the darkened clinic with painstaking care, freezing at every sound. At one point they had to press themselves into a supply closet as a security guard passed, Ellie's hand resting on Lumina's muzzle to keep him silent. The foal remained unnaturally calm, his consciousness steady against hers despite the danger. When they finally reached the rear exit, Ellie paused to listen for any sign of activity outside. Hearing nothing, she pushed the door open and led Lumina into the night air. The quarter-mile to her truck seemed to stretch endlessly before them, each step exposed and vulnerable under the moonlight. They had made it halfway when floodlights suddenly blazed to life behind them, illuminating the clinic grounds. An alarm began to wail, its shrill cry shattering the night's silence. "Someone must have checked the stalls," Ellie gasped. "Run, Lumina!" They abandoned stealth for speed, racing toward where the truck waited. Lumina, despite his youth, kept pace with Ellie easily, his stride powerful and sure. They could hear shouts behind them now, the sound of pursuit growing closer. The truck appeared ahead, a darker shadow among the trees. Just 100 yards more, Ellie thought desperately. Just a little further. They reached the truck just as the beam of a flashlight swept across the trees behind them. Ellie fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking as she unlocked the small horse trailer attached to her truck. It was designed for a single adult horse, not ideal, but adequate for Lumina's still developing frame. "In, quickly," she whispered, guiding him up the ramp. Lumina hesitated for just a moment, his consciousness brushing against hers with a mixture of fear and trust. Then he stepped forward, entering the confined space with remarkable composure for a foal who had never been trailered before. Ellie secured the back gate and sprinted to the driver's door, sliding in and starting the engine in one fluid motion. Through the rearview mirror, she could see figures emerging from the tree line, flashlights bobbing in the darkness as they shouted to one another. She pulled away slowly at first, lights off to avoid immediate detection, bumping along the rough access road that connected to the main highway. Only when they reached the paved road did she switch on the headlights and accelerate, her heart hammering against her ribs. "We did it," she breathed, glancing in the mirror to ensure no headlights appeared behind them. "We actually did it." A wave of cautious relief flowed from Lumina in the trailer, though she could sense his discomfort at the unfamiliar motion and confinement. "I know it's not comfortable," she said, speaking aloud, though she knew he could sense her thoughts. "Just a few hours, then we'll find somewhere to rest." Ellie had no clear destination in mind, only a vague plan to head north into the mountains where her grandfather had once owned a hunting cabin. She wasn't even certain the cabin still stood, but it was remote enough to provide temporary shelter while she figured out their next move. 20 minutes into their escape, her phone began to ring. The screen displayed Maxwell's name, and Ellie felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. She silenced the call, then turned the phone off completely, knowing it could be used to track their location. The highway stretched before them, empty in the early morning hours. Ellie maintained a steady speed, careful to avoid drawing attention from any passing patrol cars. The reality of what she had done was beginning to sink in. She had stolen Lumina, a horse valued at millions, from one of the most powerful men in the racing industry. There would be no going back from this, no explanation that could justify her actions in a court of law. Worth it. Freedom worth risk. Lumina's sentiment flowed into her mind, a warm certainty that helped steady her racing thoughts. "I hope so," she replied softly, "for both our sakes." They drove through the night, stopping only once at a deserted rest area to check on Lumina and offer him water. The disguise was holding. His luminous white coat remained hidden beneath the dull gray dye, making him look like any ordinary gray foal. Still, Ellie worked quickly, anxious to be back on the road before anyone could take note of them. As dawn broke over the eastern horizon, Ellie turned onto a series of progressively smaller roads, heading into the mountains that rose like a blue-green wall in the distance. The truck strained against the increasing grade, the trailer swaying slightly on the winding roads. Others following, not far. Lumina's warning jolted Ellie from her exhausted daze. She checked the mirrors frantically but saw nothing on the road behind them. "Are you sure?" she asked. The impression she received in return was difficult to interpret. Not visual awareness, but something more instinctive, a sense of pursuit that transcended normal perception. No, they come. Different ways to track. Ellie gripped the steering wheel tighter. Of course, Maxwell would use every resource at his disposal. Police reports, helicopter searches, informants at gas stations and rest stops. A white foal and a woman traveling alone would be easily identifiable. "We're almost there," she said, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Just a little further into the mountains. The road narrowed further, becoming little more than a dirt track that wound through dense pine forest. Ellie strained to remember the route from childhood visits, looking for landmarks her grandfather had pointed out. There, a distinctive rock formation that resembled a bear's head. She turned onto an almost invisible path that branched away from the main track. The truck bounced violently over the rough terrain, forcing Ellie to slow to a crawl. She could feel Lumina's discomfort in the trailer, but also his determination. Neither of them had come this far to turn back now. Finally, as the sun climbed higher in the morning sky, a small clearing appeared ahead. The cabin stood just as Ellie remembered it, a simple one-room structure built of rough-hewn logs, weathered by decades of mountain seasons but still fundamentally sound. "We made it," she sighed, bringing the truck to a stop beside the cabin. The air was cool and pine-scented as Ellie stepped out, stretching her cramped muscles. She moved quickly to the trailer, lowering the ramp to release Lumina. The foal emerged cautiously, his legs stiff from the long journey. Despite his discomfort, his consciousness reached for hers immediately, radiating wonder at the new surroundings, the towering trees, the clear mountain air, the absolute quiet broken only by birdsong. Beautiful, free place. "Yes," Ellie agreed, watching as he took his first tentative steps into the clearing. "My grandfather used to bring me here when I was little. No one knows about it except family, and they rarely come since he passed." She unlocked the cabin with a key hidden beneath a specific stone, her grandfather's idea of security in a place so remote it hardly needed protection. The interior was dusty but intact, containing a simple cot, a wood stove, and basic furniture. "It's not much," she told Lumina, "but it's safe for now." The foal approached the cabin curiously, peering through the open door. His coat, despite the dye, seemed to collect what little sunlight filtered through the trees, giving him a subtle glow that reminded Ellie of his true appearance. "We should wash that dye off," she said. "There's a stream nearby where you can drink and I can clean your coat." As she gathered supplies from the truck, a wave of exhaustion washed over Ellie. She hadn't slept in over 24 hours, and the adrenaline that had carried her through their escape was fading rapidly. But there was no time to rest. They needed water, Lumina needed proper food, and the cabin needed basic preparation to become habitable. "Rest first. I watch." Lumina's suggestion came with a gentle nudge against her consciousness, a reassurance that he could alert her to any danger. "Just a quick nap," Ellie conceded, realizing she would be useless if she collapsed from exhaustion. "Then we need to figure out our next steps." Inside the cabin, she sank onto the dusty cot, not even bothering to remove her shoes. Through the open door, she could see Lumina standing at the edge of the clearing, his posture alert as he surveyed their surroundings. Despite his youth, there was something ancient and watchful in his stance, a guardian from another time. As sleep claimed her, Ellie's last conscious thought was a mixture of fear and determination. They had escaped, but this was just the beginning. Maxwell Stone would not give up easily on finding his $1 million miracle foal. And when he did, because Ellie had no illusions that this remote cabin would hide them forever, what would become of them then? Ellie woke to the golden light of late afternoon filtering through the cabin's dusty windows. For a moment, disorientation gripped her. Where was she? Then the memories flooded back. The escape, the desperate drive through the night, the mountain cabin that represented their tenuous sanctuary. She bolted upright, panic seizing her heart. Lumina. She rushed to the door, only to find the foal grazing peacefully at the edge of the clearing. He lifted his head as she appeared, his consciousness reaching for hers with a calm reassurance. Safe. Rested now? Yes, she breathed, relief washing over her. I didn't mean to sleep so long. The dye on Lumina's coat had begun to fade, patches of his true white coloring showing through the artificial gray. In the mountain sunlight, those patches seemed to capture and amplify the light, creating an ethereal glow that no ordinary horse could possess. Ellie set about establishing their temporary home, finding the cabin's well still functional and the solar battery system her grandfather had installed still capable of providing basic power. She located the small storage shed where emergency supplies were kept, canned goods for her, and thankfully, several bags of feed that, while not ideal for a growing foal, would sustain Lumina until she could arrange something better. As dusk approached, Ellie led Lumina to the stream that ran along the western edge of the property. While he drank, she began to wash away the remaining dye, revealing his luminous coat in full. With his true appearance restored, Lumina seemed more himself, more than just a remarkable foal, but a being of almost otherworldly beauty. What happens now? Ellie asked as they walked back to the cabin. We can't hide forever. Maxwell has resources, connections. Eventually he'll find us. Lumina's response came as a series of impressions rather than distinct thoughts. Time passing, seasons changing, his body growing stronger, his abilities developing. And beneath these images, a sense of purpose not yet fulfilled. You need time, Ellie interpreted. Time to grow, to become whatever you're meant to be. Yes, not ready yet, but soon. That night, as Ellie sat on the cabin's small porch with Lumina beside her, the stars emerged in the clear mountain sky with a brilliance impossible to see in the light-polluted valleys below. The Milky Way stretched across the heavens like a road of silver dust. Lumina gazed upward, his consciousness filled with a longing so profound it brought tears to Ellie's eyes when it touched her mind. What are you? She whispered. Really? The answer came not in words or even coherent thoughts, but in a flood of sensations and fractured images. Stars burning in ancient skies, horses running across primordial plains, bloodlines stretching back to the dawn of time, wisdom passed from generation to generation, waiting for the right vessel, the right moment, and something more, a mission, a purpose, a balance to be restored between humans and the natural world. I don't understand, Ellie said, overwhelmed by the complexity of what Lumina was trying to convey. Not meant to understand all, only help, friend, guardian. They settled into a cautious routine over the following days. Ellie ventured into the nearest town only once, wearing a disguise and paying cash for supplies. She caught glimpses of news reports about the stolen miracle foal. Maxwell had indeed reported the theft, offering a substantial reward for information leading to Lumina's recovery. But in their mountain sanctuary, such concerns seemed distant. Lumina continued his remarkable development, growing with astonishing speed and demonstrating abilities that defied explanation. He could move objects with a focused thought, sense events happening miles away, and his communication with Ellie grew increasingly sophisticated, approaching true language rather than just impressions and emotions. 2 weeks after their escape, as they walked together through a high meadow carpeted with wildflowers, Lumina suddenly stopped, his entire body tensing. They found us. Coming soon. Ellie felt her heart drop. How? How did they find us? Not important. Was always coming. Time now. Time for what? Ellie asked, fear making her voice sharp. Instead of answering directly, Lumina turned his gaze skyward. The afternoon was clear, the sun bright overhead, But as Ellie followed his gaze, she saw something impossible. A star visible in the daylight sky, growing brighter as she watched. "What's happening?" she whispered. "My purpose. Why I came. Show them." Before Ellie could ask what he meant, the sound of vehicles reached them, multiple engines growing louder as they approached the cabin below. Lumina seemed unconcerned, his attention still fixed on the brightening star above. "We have to hide," Ellie urged, tugging at his halter. "Lumina, please." The foal finally looked at her, his sapphire eyes filled with a compassion and wisdom that transcended his physical age. "No more hiding. Time to reveal. Trust me." Together, they walked back toward the cabin, arriving just as several vehicles pulled into the clearing. Maxwell's black SUV, a police car, Dr. Tate's sedan, and two unmarked vans that Ellie guessed contained security personnel. Maxwell was the first to emerge, his face flushed with anger when he spotted them at the edge of the trees. "There they are," he shouted, pointing. "Get them." But as the group started forward, Lumina stepped in front of Ellie, his stance protective. And then, before the astonished eyes of everyone present, his body began to transform. The luminous quality of his coat intensified until it seemed he was composed of light itself, his form both solid and radiant. A being of flesh and cosmic energy somehow merged into one. The black star on his forehead expanded, becoming a swirling vortex of darkness against his brilliant white coat. Not an absence of light, but something deeper, more profound, like a window into space itself. "My God," Dr. Tate breathed, her scientific detachment shattered by the sight before her. "What is he?" Maxwell and his security team had frozen in place, their faces masks of shock and disbelief. Only Dr. Richards, the researcher from Switzerland, seemed unsurprised, watching with an expression more like recognition than amazement. Lumina's consciousness expanded outward, touching not just Ellie now, but everyone present. His communication came as pure thought, understandable to all despite their differences in language and perception. "I am messenger, witness, reminder of what was forgotten." Images flooded into their collective awareness. The ancient partnership between humans and horses, the sacred trust broken by greed and exploitation, the wisdom lost when animals became commodities rather than conscious beings worthy of respect and protection. Long we waited for right vessel, right time. Aurora knew her purpose, carried me into your world through pain and sacrifice. Now you must choose. Continue path of separation and dominion, or remember connection, restore balance. Ellie felt tears streaming down her face as she finally understood. Lumina was more than a miracle foal. He was a bridge between worlds, a being sent to remind humanity of a forgotten covenant with the natural world. Maxwell had sunk to his knees, his face transformed by the revelation washing through him. Dr. Tate was frantically trying to document what she was seeing, though her hands shook too badly to operate her equipment. The others stood transfixed, their previous purposes forgotten in the face of this impossible reality. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, Lumina's radiance provided the only light in the gathering dusk. He turned to Ellie, his consciousness embracing hers with a love and gratitude that transcended ordinary bonds. "My guardian, my friend, your choice now. Stay with your kind, or come with me to learn, to help others understand." Ellie looked from Lumina to the humans gathered in the clearing, their faces still slack with wonder. The choice before her was momentous: remain in the world she knew, or step into something greater, becoming a bridge herself between humanity and whatever deeper wisdom Lumina represented. In her heart, she had already decided the moment she first felt his consciousness touch her own. "I'll come with you," she said simply, "wherever that leads." Lumina's joy radiated outward like ripples in a pond, touching everyone present, As darkness fell completely, his light grew even brighter, illuminating the clearing like a second sun. The star in the sky that had appeared earlier descended toward them, no longer a distant point, but a swirling vortex of light and energy that mirrored the mark on Lumina's forehead. In that final moment, as reality itself seemed to bend around them, Ellie placed her hand on Lumina's neck and felt the boundary between them dissolve. No longer human and horse, but partners in a journey just beginning, messengers of a truth too long forgotten.